Welcome to Status Secure, the weekly cyber threat briefing for executives who refuse to operate in the blind. Hosted by the Watcher 6 Collective, uniting former Army Special Forces and Naval Special Warfare Communications operators, alongside an industry-leading CISO nominated for Cybersecurity Woman of the World. We cut through the noise and give you the operational intelligence you need for mission success in a hostile digital environment. The enemy is listening. Is your status secure? Welcome to Status Secure. Today we're covering how AI is accelerating the speed at which attackers find and exploit vulnerabilities. The window between a flaw going public and it being weaponized is collapsing. And the CISA KEV catalog, the single most useful free resource most organizations still aren't using to prioritize what to fix. And then we're going to get into the big one for today, a field guide to threat intelligence sources, where you can actually go to get reliable intel without just randomly signing up for every free feed on the internet. CISO, let's start with the speed problem. What's changing about how fast vulnerabilities are getting exploited, and why is AI the accelerant?
Yeah, I mean, the gap between a vulnerability being disclosed and being exploited in the wild is shrinking. I mean, attackers now weaponize faster than many orgs can patch. I mean, this was always a problem before, but now it's becoming an even, it's increasing. That gap is getting bigger and bigger. So AI tools accelerate the discovery of software flaws and the creation of working exploits, right? So lowering the skill floor and raising the speed for attackers. So they're finding these vulnerabilities faster than, they're getting patched. And that's really the big issue here, right? Before it was very common ground. It took them a while to find the vulnerabilities, but in the meantime, patches were coming out, and then companies could patch them before the attackers could exploit them. Well, that's changing. In 2026, so this year, Senator Mark Warner introduced the Combat Emerging Threats to Critical Infrastructure Act. Then it's explicitly citing concern that AI could accelerate the discovery and exploitation of software flaws, plus AI supply chain vulnerabilities, deepfakes, and quantum-enabled attacks on cryptography, right? So every sector runs the same software stack. A fast weaponized CVE in a common library or appliance hits healthcare, GovCon, tech, and finance simultaneously. Do you remember, is it CrowdStrike? It wasn't a security, it wasn't a vulnerability, but basically they had a change management. They had introduced an issue into their release, right? And it impacted the world, the globe. Can you imagine a vulnerability, right, that an attacker finds that is the same, that has the same impact, right? So the defensive problem is no longer, are we aware of vulnerabilities? It's, can we prioritize and act faster than an AI accelerated attacker? That makes good threat intelligence the difference between patching the right thing today and the wrong thing next week. Because I mean, the list is huge. So where do you start as a company? How do you prioritize it?
Yeah, and that speed problem is exactly why our second topic today matters, because you can't just patch everything, right? So you have to know what's actually being exploited right now. I mean, that's what the CISA KEV catalog is. Can you walk us through it? Because it's free, it's authoritative, and a lot of organizations still aren't using it.
Yeah, so the CISA is the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. It's a free, authoritative, continuously updated list of vulnerabilities confirmed to be actively exploited in the wild, right? Published by the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So that's CISA, right? It's different from a CVE list because thousands of CVEs are published. KEV tells you the ones attackers are actually using right now. It converts an impossible patch backlog into a range priority. And I mentioned that, right? If you go on Microsoft, like most large companies, will publish their CVE list and then, give you the patches. But you're talking about, thousands of different sites, thousands of CVEs on each of those sites, right? So the KEV has rapidly become a default reference for vulnerability prioritization across both public and private sector teams. It's one of the highest quality free sources available. And KEV is one source, a free government one. The back half of the a full map of where reliable intel comes from and how to use it without drowning in noise. I mean, if you look at all the places that you can look at, if you've ever started looking at threat intel, you're going to be overwhelmed. I mean, there's a ton of sources. And so it's like, which ones do you use? Start with the CISA KEV.
Yeah. And so on that note, what are 3 things to do this week on the vulnerability speed problem before we get into the sourcing of this intelligence?
Well, first it's, the KEV is free. So cross-reference your asset inventory against the KEV, right? Identify like what inventory you actually have against the KEV and fix what's confirmed exploited first. That's the first thing to do. Next is, treat actively exploited as a different severity class with a faster clock than your normal cycle, because the attacker's clock is faster now. Most people do critical vulnerabilities within 30 days. These, you see one of these on your, in your environment, just, I would say within 7 days or faster. You can, and then know your attack surface, right? You can't prioritize intel against assets you don't know you have. And asset inventory is the precondition. We talked about this, all the time. You need to know what's in your system, what's in your environment, so you can actually, protect it.
Yeah. And that last point is the doorway into our main conversation today. So knowing what's being exploited is only useful if you have reliable sources telling you what's happening out there. And this is where a lot of companies maybe are missing out, right? They either rely on nothing or they randomly sign up for a bunch of different free tools, kind of just a bunch of noise maybe. So let's build that map. Give us the field guide. Where does threat intelligence actually come from? What are the real categories of sources? And how does a company that isn't, say, a Fortune 500 company, but with their kind of budget maybe, build this without wasting money or time?
Yeah, so there's, threat intel isn't just one thing, right? Like, you can't just look at one source. There's actually 4 categories of sources, right? And so you need to review each one. The first category is your government ones, your free authoritative sources, right? So we talked about the KEV. The FBI has InfoGuard, right? If you're not familiar with that program, the FBI partners with private sector members across 16 critical infrastructure. So find out if you're in one of those 16 critical infrastructure, sign up for your local InfoGuard, right? I mean, there's a background check and all of that. So it's not like they allow anybody in there. And then you'll get, information directly from the FBI for your particular sector. The MITRE attack, that one's also free, based on attacker tactics and techniques. That one's been around for a long time. Take a look at it. It's very comprehensive. The second category is your ISACs, right? So these are specific sharing. So I talked about the InfoGuard. This one is, these are like information sharing and analysis centers. They're member-based, sector-specific, they're trust communities. So, the major ones are like the FS ISAC, which is the financial service, H ISAC, which is for healthcare, E ISAC, electricity, right? So they're across. These provide government intelligence information, sector relevant sharing. So it's not just from the government, but it's also from, the community, right, itself. Third is open source platforms and free feeds, right? The malware information sharing platform, it's the open source, things that are widely, used is that, your Open CTI, Alien Vault, OTX. I would, Malware Bazaar, they're high value, but free. And so, a lot of times there's a hidden cost, right? They're difficult to kind of figure out, engineering time to run and tune it. So again, anything free, buyer beware, okay, in that category. The fourth is, of course, commercial platforms, right? So these are vendors that provide threat intel, and you pay for them to do, to cross-reference all of the categories and all of the information. Recorded Future, Mandiant Advantage, CrowdStrike, Falcon Intelligence, and Anomaly, ThreatStream, Threat Connect. I mean, these are big names, right? But there's a lot of players in this space. So take a look at them, and see if this is for you, if one of these commercial platforms is for you. These are mostly for larger organizations when you have the budget, right? You have the money. But if you're smaller, you've got to build it yourself, or you got to take a look because you have to hire someone, you have to build it. Maybe it's worth the time to look at these commercial, like the vendors, right? So these categories layer on each other. So free government, sector ISACs, a couple of high signal open sources, and then maybe, you can talk to like one threat intel vendors and maybe get a subscription and start small, right? And build up as you get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And that's kind of, that's a good point. And, my question on that is, so you've provided a map, kind of a broad range of tools. And if I wanted to narrow in, say I'm a tech company, spending, maybe I do have some budget to put into this. How do I know which of these to pick? Like, what separates the source that's worth my time from the noise?
Yeah, I mean, a good source tells you where the data came from, what behavior was observed, and how it relates to a real attack, not just a raw list of, IPs. I would say like there's a lot of noise, right? If you start looking at threat intel and all of the different feeds, and sources, consuming multiple feeds with no like management layer, your analyst is going to get super overwhelmed. I mean, just as a human, but there's AI now. Hey, this is where AI can be, used for good. So, somebody or something has to look at all that noise and make sense of it. So you need a layer that normalizes, duplicates, and scores. That's what the threat intelligence platforms, that's what they usually do for you, right? But you need that. You can't just ingest, like you can't just have a person sitting there trying to look at multiple feeds and multiple sources. It's overwhelming. It's too much, right? And then they're going to miss the critical signals. So a sector ISAC feed relevant to your industry beats 10 generic global feeds, right? So match the source to your actual threat model and asset inventory. That's the key. Don't look at everything. Just look at what like figure out your inventory and then match your inventory to the feed.
Got it. Yeah. And so before we skip to the end, or we cover kind of the marching orders of our advice, let's just riff on this a little bit. So you brought this up because every week we get together and we chat about, hey, what do we want to talk about this week? Maybe there's some current events going on. And you brought this topic up of like, okay, threat intel, sources and whatnot. So why not, like off script here, walk me through, like, why was that in your head? Why was this the topic you wanted to discuss? I mean, any other sort of pieces of that we haven't touched on yet that you can riff on a bit for us?
Sure. I mean, vulnerabilities have been around for a long time. As soon as the first person who realized, okay, a long time. What's that Star Wars thing that always goes by? In a galaxy far away, a long time ago. The internet was born, and people started building things, right? And it was open. It was open because everybody was so excited. Well, the first bad actor, realized that, hey, they could take advantage of what was being done, right? And so vulnerabilities and bad actors and threats, right? They've been around since the beginning, right? You can't have good and not have bad, okay? So and I was thinking about that. This has not gone away. It's not like we got better and these vulnerabilities went away. I mean, even though we have a list of them, right? It's not like, if you take a look at, some recent attacks and, some of the big ones, they came in through some kind of vulnerability, right? If it wasn't human, if it wasn't like social engineering, then it was through a vulnerability. Somebody didn't patch something somewhere, right? And it's such an easy thing to close, but why doesn't it happen? And it's only going to get worse. That's why I was thinking about it. Yeah. And especially with what we saw, like I mentioned before, like with CrowdStrike, that was unintended and it wasn't a bad actor. It was just a human, a human error. But what if it was a bad actor? They're going to take down the entire world, right? With one vulnerability. That's a possibility now.
Well, and that's happened. No, I mean, not in like that big scale, terrifying event maybe, but we've had these events have happened where like Amazon Web Servers go down, right? And like half the internet's offline. Like this has happened. And so, right, it's good to stay ahead of it, ahead of the curve, and having that intel is helpful. What it makes me think of is, kind of off topic, I guess. But back when I was in the military and we deployed, and you're looking at your little fire base, if you will, and you have your sectors, and you have a plan mapped out to keep you secure, right? And you'll look at it and you'll go, hey, there's a gap here. Like there's a gap between these sectors of fire, or there's a gap in like our security perimeter. And why hasn't anybody paid attention to it? Maybe we need to close it and have eyes on it, because that's that like place that the enemy could just literally walk in, and nobody's covering that. And that's kind of a more tangible example, but that's what I'm hearing with this kind of stuff. It's going like, making sure we close those gaps, but how can we close them if we don't know where they are?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this too, which is you have to have the same goal, right? Because your security people are looking at that gap and saying, hey, some attacker could come in here and just, get all of our people. But then you have like, I don't know, like, but then you have like these CEOs and executives and, leaders who are like, okay, thanks for telling me about the gap, but I don't care about that. I need us to move faster to get to this, over this ridge, right? Like, which one do you do? Do you put your resources towards moving everything to, to that location up there? Or do you, close this like gap, right? This hole that you see, knowing that you're going to be moving. I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Like at the security level, always we want to close the gap, but then at the leadership level, they're always like, well, yeah, but if we move fast enough, that gap won't be there, right? So
yeah, and I think it's the role of that leader, right? It's the reason why that person's maybe the CEO or what have you, because it's their job to make a decision, regardless if either decision is perfect or not, right? They've got to make those decisions, and most of the time, whatever decision they make, someone's not going to be happy, or something's not going to get done in order to move forward. And so if you go back maybe to like the security person on this conversation, it's your job to be like ready. It's your job to know this stuff. It's your job to know where the vulnerabilities are, have a course of action, a plan of action in place, and say, this is what the problem is. This is our solution. Maybe this is what it'll cost. So on and so on and so on, to be able to brief that leader so they can make a more educated decision. And that's just kind of the nature of it.
No, yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I would say is a lot of security people talk from a security perspective. You got to talk from, and this is unfortunate, but you've got to talk from the business. Like if you're a private sector profit organization, you have to talk from that, right? Because I can tell you the executives like, well, it's your job to keep security in place, right? So you figure it out, right? If you want that executive to be on, because you need their support, and for them to kind of build the culture from the top down, that security is important. You're going to have to talk to them in terms of revenue, right? In terms of money. Like, how is this gonna impact, like, their bottom line, right? Their speed to market, their their desire for operational efficiency. So the books, so the line, like the line, in their ledger, right, is less. Like their cost, right, is less. Like you got to talk in those terms. And most security professionals aren't very good at that. They're just talking about, hey, there's a hole here. Yeah, there's a hole here.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah, I think there's two topics there. if we can learn them, one is the revenue conversation. Like, don't just like barge through the doors and say, give me $10 million to, solve all these problems. Like, it's probably not going to happen. So understanding like realistic, like revenue in terms of what you're trying to accomplish security wise. But the other conversation too can be a little bit more, reputational, PR. Think of like LastPass was a good example. LastPass had, I forget, years ago, they had some kind of breach or whatever, but basically they lost their reputation in the market and so many people dropped them and switched to their competitor because of that. And that's another angle of like, depending on what industry you're in or what you're doing, being able to pitch that like, hey, if this vulnerability gets exploited, it doesn't just like, they can't, it's not just that they're going to steal information or whatever, cause something bad to happen, which would cost X amount of dollars to fix. So then that's the revenue side. But the other side is depending on what you're doing, you could also say, look, this could be a relationship killer. And if you have any deals in the pipeline, like big deals going on, and this happens, you might lose all of them all at once and lose current clients because of that. So that's another way of having that conversation. But you can't, you can't do that with every conversation. Otherwise then you become like the boy who cries wolf all the time. So there is a little bit of a technique to it.
It is. I mean, it's all about customer trust, right? That's what happened to LastPass. They lost their customers' trust. Yeah. You can't say, hey, I'm going to keep your passwords secure, and then you can't secure yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into this marching orders. So we covered the AI accelerated exploitation and the KEV catalog at the top. We provided some resources that you can use, maybe some advice on how to narrow down what's for you, and some tips about how to present to maybe the deal maker in the conversation. And so, CISA, why don't you walk us through the 3 marching orders of this week for what we've discussed?
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, the first order is lock in the free authoritative baseline, right? We talked about them, like CISA KEV, MITRE attack, the OSINT. There's like OSINT. There's like, 1 or 2 high signal open feeds, right? No, so you don't have an excuse. These are, free authoritative sources, right? The second order is join your sector's trusted sharing community, right? The ISACs, right? There's finance. There's 16 of them. Find the one that you're in and join one, because you need your community, because people see things. If you see something, tell, right? So these communities are all about that. If they see something, they share, they tell, right? So it doesn't happen. So maybe it'll only happen to one in the community and not to all, right? And this is a trusted layer because everybody wants their sector to be successful, right? And then of course decide build versus buy. I mean, this is something that only, you can decide. You're going to have to make that, the pros, the cons, the costs, right? The trade-offs. So if you're consuming more than a couple of feeds, you need that translation layer, right? So whether you build it or you buy it, right? To normalize, dedupe, and score all of the feeds, right? So match the spend to your threat model, right? Don't buy a vendor just to ignore them. I've seen companies do that. They spend a lot of money purchasing these these vendors that give you really great threat intel, and then nobody sees it except for one analyst. Nobody hears about it except for some poor security analyst, in the corner, right? Make sure that you're actually incorporating it into your business process. Mm-hmm.
Got it. So AI is collapsing the time attackers need to weaponize a vulnerability. The CISA KEV catalog is the free anchor that tells you what to fix first, but knowing what to fix means having reliable intelligence. And the field guide is simple. Start with free government sources. Join your sector's trusted sharing community. Add some high signal open feeds. Only buy commercial when your threat model justifies it. Don't randomly sign up for noise. Remember, the adversary reads the public sources too. And watch the legal ground under the intel sharing because it's shifting. So mission success starts with knowing, another thing that we also talked about too is knowing how to you have this intel, you have this information, you see the threats, you know maybe the solutions, and also maybe learning, maybe doing some study on how to appropriately pitch that to the decision maker. That's also a helpful tool. Maybe we'll have an episode on that, right? So yeah, mission success starts with knowing where your intel comes from and acting on it faster than the other side. So trust but verify your own posture, and prioritize off Kev. Join your ISAC. Stand up for management layer of your feeds. Execute the standard. And we'll see you next week. Mission success isn't about luck. It's about preparation. You've heard the intel. Now, go put it to use. If you need to verify your security posture, I've established a secure line at watcher6.com/secure. Go there to get the briefing the enemy doesn't want you to have. We'll see you next week. Until then, keep your head on a swivel.